Hi guys, Dan Carr here with another photo mechanic tutorial. Now, after I made the first big tutorial, which mainly covered ingesting and variables and use of IPTC templates, I had a few requests from people to cover the process that I use to combine an Adobe Lightroom workflow with a photo mechanic workflow. Both programs are very powerful, but at the moment both of them are quite different. So photo mechanic is brilliant for keywording and applying IPTC templates and sorting your photos after a shoot, but it currently doesn't have any cataloging to it, so you can't easily look back through your archive of photos without just opening all the folders individually. And it also doesn't have Adobe's ability to make small edits to the photos. So a lot of people out there are using both programs, and to get them to run smoothly together, I thought we would just go through the process that I use, and I'll show you how to set it all up. So, first of all, I'm going to open Photo Mechanic. And this is the very first thing you need to do. Go to Preferences, and you'll see all these color classes here, 1 through 8 in Photo Mechanic. What's important to realize, in Lightroom, we actually only have 1 through 5. So if you're using Photo Mechanic and Lightroom, anything that you label 6, 7, or 8 will not be carried over properly to Lightroom. It will just group them all together as gray colored, and they will just be called custom labeled. So they won't have there won't be a separate for 6, 7, and 8. So it's best to probably try and ignore those, or maybe use just 6. And then we have all the colors. The colors and the labels here are the Photo Mechanic preset ones. You can change the colors if you want, but personally I don't mind them. So what we're worried about here is the naming of them. You'll see we have winner, winner alternative, superior, superior alternative, and typical. What we need to do is to make sure that these are matched exactly to what Lightroom has, so that it knows that when you call one a winner, it's going to call one a winner as well. And what we need to do there, let's go over to Lightroom, go to Metadata, Color Label Set here, and then click Edit. Now, I've actually already filled this one in really quickly to speed things up, but when you first open it, you're going to notice that it says red, yellow, green, blue, and purple. So I've changed those, winner, winner alternative. I've matched them exactly to what Photo Mechanic has. We'll go one step further, save current preset. So we'll call this one Photo Mechanic, obviously, and change. So now we can access these in here, color label set. It automatically comes with Bridge, Lightroom, and one called Review Status. So it has 3 different options. Now you can see our one that we just made, Photo Mechanic. So now, popping back to Photo Mechanic quickly, if I were to find a photo in here and I was to label it with a number 1 for purple, over in Lightroom it would show up as red, but they would at least be still matched, and if you wanted to change the colors here, you could change this to red and you could match up all the colors. But what's important is that numbers 1 through 5 that I'm going to use for sorting my photos will show up as 5 different colors here, and they will all be matched exactly, as long as you edited this list right and you made everything match what it says in Photo Mechanic. So that is step number 1 to get these programs to play nicely together. Right, so the next little piece of setup that we need to do before we embark on this combined workflow is back in Lightroom again. We're going to go to Lightroom, we're going to go to Catalog Settings, and we're going to check this little box here that says Automatically Write Changes into XMP. Now, this is going to help us somewhat, but basically what we're telling Lightroom to do here is that if we make some sort of a change in here to some metadata, or maybe some labeling, maybe we change the color, maybe we give it 3 stars instead of the 5 stars that we had in Photo Mechanic, or something like that. What we're telling it to do here is to write this change into the XMP sidecar file, and we're asking it to do that automatically. Now, you can do it manually, and when you do it manually, which we'll cover later on in the video, it will happen at the time that you do it manually. But sometimes we don't remember to do it, or sometimes you're making a whole bunch of changes, and ticking this box to automatically do it can be helpful. As far as I can see, it's not really a problem in any way, but what I will say is that if you have a huge catalog, and I'm talking thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of photos, Lightroom might take some time to get round to making this automatic change. So at this point, you might make a change in Lightroom and you might switch right over to Photo Mechanic and you're like, oh, this one, I just left it here and I gave it 3 stars, and back over here in Photo Mechanic it's still got 5 stars. Why is this happening to me? Well, that is because when Lightroom makes the automatic changes totally depends on all the other background processes that are happening on your computer. I actually questioned Adobe about this and they said it is almost impossible to figure out when it's going to make this automatic save. But it's there. If you check this little box, then you're safe. If you just leave it, at some point it will eventually get around to saving these changes, so both Photo Mechanic and Lightroom will match up. So in terms of setup, this is the second thing that we need to do. Now there's one more thing that we need to do to get this set up correctly. So we'll go back to Photo Mechanic, click up here, click Preferences, and we're going to go to the tab IPTC/XMP. Now IPTC and XMP are a whole subject to themselves, really, so I'm not going to cover them in huge detail here. Google around if you want to learn a little bit more about them. But essentially XMP is a standard that Adobe created, and IPTC has been around a little bit longer. So what we need to do is make sure that Lightroom and Photo Mechanic understand exactly what they are writing to these files. So I'll go through the settings that are going to be the best ones for you to use if you're using Lightroom. Now, if you remember, in the preferences for Lightroom, we set it to automatically make changes to the XMP. So this is important to remember. Here we're going to ask Photo Mechanic for JPEGs, TIFFs, PSDs, and DNGs. Currently it says read embedded IPTC before XMP. Well, we're going to change that to the other option, read embedded XMP before IPTC. The embedded XMP is what we asked Lightroom earlier on to write to, so that's going to be the important thing for us here. Oh dear, battery's dying. Okay, for TIFF-based RAW photos, search in the following order. Now again, our important thing as we're using Adobe products here is to change this to read XMP sidecar file first, and then read embedded XMP second, and then here it says third is read the embedded IPTC. Okay, and over here, this is when writing to the IPTC, so this is what Photo Mechanic is doing to the files. For JPEG, TIFF, PSD, and DNG, add both embedded IPTC and IPTC for XMP. That is fine, leave that one alone. Now for TIFF-based RAW photos, when we're writing to them, we don't really need to do these IPTC fields here. You'll notice that when you untick all of these, it grays out this option here. It's not graying out because it isn't going to do it, it's graying out because that is what it will definitely do. Does that make sense? So having unselected these, now it will always create and or update XMP sidecar file with IPTC for XMP. IPTC for XMP is just a standard where all IPTC records can be written to an XMP file. So this is basically asking Photo Mechanic to either update an XMP sidecar file or create one. So if we haven't already done something in Adobe, then we might need to create one. But then we know it's writing to an XMP file, and XMP is Adobe standard, so that is what will be recognized in Lightroom. So all of this can be left okay. So we'll just click OK there. Okay, now we have these two programs set up and ready for our workflow. So I'm going to run you through exactly how I do things from this point onwards. And there might be a few instances where you want to make a few small changes to this flow to suit your Lightroom catalog that you're trying to create or already work with. But I'll make some suggestions along the way, and you can see how I do it, and hopefully that's a good starting point for you. So the first thing, pop a memory card in. It's going to bring up the ingest window. Now in the first video I went through pretty extensively about all the options in the ingest window and using the variables for folder naming and things like that, so I'm not going to bother with that. I would go to the IPTC stationery pad right here and make sure that all the common information that is relevant to all the photos from the shoot is filled in here. So normally I have what we call a basic start template down here, which just has all of my information, contact information and things like that, and a basic caption which just fills in the date and the credit and things like that. So these particular photos were shot at the CES show in Las Vegas. So all of them would have city, Las Vegas, location, CES, Nevada, USA, and a quick headline. And this is going to get applied to all of them. So this is the first thing I do once the Ingest window is opened. Sort out what is common to all of the photos, so locations and things like that. So we close that and check all of this information, and we hit Ingest. There we go, Ingest complete. There's only 4 photos because I wanted to keep this real quick and just do a quick example. So the next thing I like to do is to run through all of the photos really quickly and do an initial cull of basically all the bad ones. So the easiest way to do that is we'll select the first photo, hit the spacebar, preview window opens. You've got some information here, which obviously you can change what Photo Mechanics shows you, and we're going to have a zoom setting here, increase or decrease zoom. You can change this to 1, which will zoom in all the way, and then hitting the Z key on the keyboard will toggle between whichever setting you have. So if you only want to go halfway in, that's halfway. I like to keep it on 1 so we can check the focus points on really critical shots. And then left and right will simply scroll through all of your photos. So at this point we're just doing an initial cull of all the really bad ones, all the completely out of focus shots, all the ones where you had the lens cap on or whatever you did. But this is the fastest way for me to go through it. Now if you look down here, we have this little box down here. If I press the T key, I will tag this photo with a little tick down here. So this is T. Press it again and it goes away. So this is the very first way that I cull down the photos. So if I like something, I give it a T. And that doesn't necessarily mean this is a number 1 shot or an A grade shot yet. This is just one that I'm going to take a further look at. So then we'll look at this, and we're like, no, and then we'll tag this one, and then we'll maybe tag this one as well. So this is just what I do with like an initial reaction. Is this worth even taking a second look at? So hitting the escape key will take you back to the main window, and then what we do is we click up here and we sort by tagged. And so now we've got 3 photos left. This could be 300 out of 400 photos if you're doing a big shoot or something like that. But this is the fastest way for me to go through the photos like this. This is one of the beauty things about Photo Mechanic is it's so quick to do this. So I use the T key and I go through and I do an initial cull of photos just by tagging them, and then I sort by tagged using this little box up here. So now we have a sort of a pre-edit that we've gone through and done with the tagged photos here. We've got rid of all the really bad ones. Well, we haven't got rid of them, we didn't delete them, but we're just showing ourselves the tagged ones on the screen. So the next thing I will do is run through, and we'll probably have a closer look at things this time. So we'll hit the space key again, and this is where I might go in and really have a look around at some of the focus elements, and make sure everything's really sharp and see what we want to do with them. Now if we hit Command 1, we will tag it down here with a color. Command 2, 3, 4, this is what we talked about before when we set the label colors. Command 0 will always take away the color. So that is one way to label the photos, and another way is to use the control and the numbers. So with control key, and you see down here we're giving it a star rating. We'll go 1, 2, 3, maybe it's a 5-star, or control 0. We'll take them away again. Now at this point, this is where things are going to differ for everybody, because you might like to really get down into the rating system, and you might want to tag things with colors and stars, and that's kind of a personal preference, or maybe the preference of your editor. If you're working with an editor, maybe they've specified certain labels they want for things, for A grade shots and B grades, or there could be some lifestyle shots and some action shots or something like that. You maybe have something else set up here. I personally keep things quite simple. I tend to stick with just a couple of colors for things that I need to make a small edit to later, or a photo that is basically good to go and upload to my Photo Shelter account, or a few basic things like that. I don't really tend to go with the star ratings so much, but what we need to make sure is just that we either give a star rating or a color rating, because whilst we've chosen these as tagged, in other words we want to take a second look at these photos, the tag system itself doesn't carry over to Lightroom. So these will, if you Lightroom doesn't have tags. I mean, Lightroom has flags, but it's kind of a proprietary thing. So, if we tag this photo, it's not going to show up as flagged in Photoshop or Lightroom. So we need to give it a color rating, or we need to give it a star rating. So I'm going to give this one, just for the sake of it, we'll give this one the color 1, we'll give this one the color 2, and we'll give this one the color 3. Why not? So now, as I said, you might want to put some star ratings or different things into this, but that's the important thing right there. And the next thing that I go once I've rated them, and it might be that I decide, well, hey, I mean, anything that I gave this rating number 3 down here, that means that when I went through the first initial one, I wasn't paying attention, and all these ones are going to get rid of from the edit. So down here we have hide color classes, and what we can do is we can say, well, color class 1 and 2, those are going to be keepers, but actually color class 3 was a mistake. I didn't, there's no reason to keep that one in the edit. So now we're just down to 2 photos. So in this case, we're going to look at adding some more IPTC information. So we just click the I button, hovering over the thumbnail, and we'll see we got all the basic information in here already that was applied using the template during the import. We got during 2012 CES, Las Vegas, Nevada, and the date and my credit. So at this point, we would write something in about this particular image. So we would call this Canon C300 with Cine. Oh, we've got capitals on there. Canon C300 with Cine lens during 2012 CES show. Now, this little button here, save and advance. So we basically click this one, or we can use Command and the square bracket. So this moves over to the next one. It gives you the handy little photo for reference, so you can write the caption for it. And the same thing, if you hover over it and hold down the zoom key, click the mouse button, it will zoom in. So if you're trying to read a small detail from the photo to help with your caption, then that's a really handy feature. But we sort of covered that in the previous video, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much longer. So we would, Fuji X Pro 1, we would write that in there, and save and advance where we've only got 2 photos. So we're done here. So this is the next stage that I do, and we'll click OK. So now we've done some basic sorting, and we've captioned them with an IPTC template, and we've added specific captions to each of the photos that we are really interested in moving forwards with. We need to do an import of these photos to Lightroom. Now, there's really 2 schools of thought on this. There are some people out there, like myself, who just import all the photos from the ingest into Lightroom, and we just keep everything. I never delete any photos because I'm worried someone will come back in the future and they'll ask me for something I've deleted. It has happened where I've looked at something and thought that's never going to sell, and then, a month, 2 months, 2 years down the line, I've ended up selling that photo for what essentially is more money than it cost me to keep it. So I don't like to waste my time deleting things, and this makes it a little bit easier for the import because I simply right click on any of the photos we have here. We click reveal in Finder. Here we see the folder, and I just take this folder and I drag it down to Lightroom. So this causes the Lightroom import window to come up, and the important thing that we do here is we don't copy, we don't move, we don't copy as DNG, we just add. We're not creating another copy of this photo because we've already done that in the ingest in Photo Mechanic anyway. So we're just making sure we have add selected here. We make sure that all of them are ticked. Render previews, this is up to you, but we don't apply any more keywords or develop settings or anything like that. I mean, I guess you could do develop settings, but we don't do any metadata. All of that was handled by Lightroom. So click import. Just in a couple of seconds we have our photos. So as you can see, the color labels that we specified over in Photo Mechanic, let's just get rid of this for a second so you can see what we're doing. The color labels all carried over. Of course, it's also showing this this one that we labeled color number 3, which we decided was not something we wanted to look at. So and this one we didn't give a color label at all. So this one here and this one here we're not interested in anymore. So we click attribute and we just select the 2 first colors. So this is showing us the photos that we're really concerned with. And maybe what I labeled for color number 1 here, maybe this was because this one needs a little bit more development. So maybe you would just go to all of the red ones and you would hit the develop module and make some basic develop settings, and maybe the ones that were labeled with color number 2, maybe those ones were already good to upload to your website or your client or something like that. All that stuff's up to you, but as you can see, if we look down here in the EXIF IPTC section, we've got all the camera information, all the captions, all my basic information exactly as it was within Photo Mechanic. So all this carried over, and you know, star ratings would have carried over as well if I'd done any star ratings. So the next thing that we want to look at is what happens if you make a change to one of these photos in Lightroom and you want it to appear in Photo Mechanic. Now perhaps you have set, you know, red means we need to do some developing on it, but once you've done that, perhaps you decide that you give that another color. So, well, actually green was not a good color because we decided that was for something we didn't like. So perhaps we give it a blue designation. So, hey, get rid of green again. So now we've labeled this one with a different color, and we want this change to carry over to Photo Mechanic. Now, when we set this all up, we had the setting here, preferences, catalog settings, automatically write changes into XMP. It will do that, and essentially that is going to write the data so it will appear in Photo Mechanic. In a larger catalog it can take some time, so if you're concerned about that, you can right click on it, go to metadata, save metadata to file. So that will now save this blue tag, or this you know, this is basically the 4th color tag, into the metadata. And if we pop back now to Photo Mechanic, you can see that it quickly changed there as we launched into the program again. So this color change has been carried forwards. And one other thing that I can show you really quickly, if you were making this change to a huge number of photos, of course you can just click Command A, select them all, and do exactly the same thing, save metadata to file. So if you ever get a little bit confused about which ones you edited in Lightroom, which ones you didn't, just select them all and save all of the metadata. That way you know that you're in the right spot. The same would go for if you were making any changes here. Maybe you add a keyword you forgot, or you change the caption really quickly or something like that. So that's how you carry a Lightroom change back to Photo Mechanic. Now what if we spotted some changes we wanted to make? Maybe it was a keyword change, but we wanted to use our keywording structured keywords that we have in Photo Mechanic, or perhaps we, you know, was a big change in the captioning and we wanted to do it in Photo Mechanic because that's what it's best for. So for example, let's just delete this whole caption here and we'll just call this Fuji from now on. So we've made this big change here. Now if you go to Lightroom right now and click on this, we go down to the caption, you'll see that the caption is still the old one. This is not what we want. So what we need to do now, as you'll see, this little up arrow just appeared. Now this is important because if you hover over it, you see on the screen it says metadata was changed externally. So we'll click this. The metadata of this photo has been changed by another application. Yes, it has. We just did it in Photo Mechanic. So now it's asking you, do you want to import the settings from disk? So basically, do you want to import the changes you made from Photo Mechanic, or overwrite the settings? What we want to do is import. So we do that, and now we see the caption down here. Now it says Fuji, just like we wanted it to. Now, what I've noticed in Lightroom is sometimes this little arrow here will not appear. If you notice that that is not appearing, there's another way to do this. You can right click on the photo, and just like metadata when we saved it before, you can just click read metadata from file and you can read them all. And again, if you're confused about changes that you might have made, maybe you made a huge number of changes in Photo Mechanic, again, Command A, right click, metadata, read metadata from files, and it's just basically going to sync everything up and make sure it's correct. Another way you can do this is to right click on the folder that the actual photos are in and click Synchronize Folder. It'll black out these ones if there aren't any new photos, but it'll leave this one ticked, Scan for metadata updates. You can click Synchronize. That is basically doing exactly what it does if you right click and go to metadata and read metadata settings. It's just another way to do it. So now we have, let's get rid of these. Now we have all of the information reading back and forth, and that's basically as simple as it gets. Once we've done all of our labeling and editing and made use of the things that Lightroom is good for, which is basically the develop settings, we can go ahead and select the ones that we want to upload, and Lightroom has some excellent export options as default, and then even better, there's a bunch of plugin modules you can get for basically any photo service you can think of, like Photo Shelter or SmugMug or Flickr, Facebook, you name it. So there's some really great exporting options from Lightroom, and I tend to do my exporting from Lightroom. If I've made obviously, if you make any changes using the develop module, you'll need to do it from Lightroom if you want the exported photos to incorporate those changes. So that's basically it. We're taking all the good bits of Photo Mechanic and the speed that it ingests photos, and the ease at which you can keyword things and caption things, and the speed at which you can flick through all the photos initially and tag them, and then we're going right out into Lightroom and making use of all the great little develop settings that you have here, and putting the two together, and that's how I do my workflow. Now, one thing I'm just going to skip back to, actually, when we imported these photos, and I talked about the two trains of thought people have, keep them all or just keep the good ones. If you wanted to selectively import these photos into Lightroom and not import the bad ones, what you would have to do is to just select the ones that you wanted to keep and right click on them and click on copy photo. It brings up the copy dialog, and basically here you would be moving the photos to a more permanent location. So in that case, when you did the ingesting, you would have selected a location which was more of a temporary location, and then this would be selecting the location maybe on your RAID drive where you keep your archive or something like that. And we wouldn't, we would make sure this is not checked because we don't need to add any more IPTC stationery, and we don't need to rename things. Here I have some renaming options, but we already renamed them on Ingest. So basically this would just be copying these photos over into this folder, and then you would do the exact same as we did before. You would reveal in Finder, and then you would just import that new folder into Lightroom, which in this case would only contain the two good photos that we've already tagged. So as I said, that method is not for me. I prefer to just keep everything, and that way I know if I make a mistake in the editing process, and it's not going to come back and bite me. But for some people, they want to keep a clean hard drive, they want to keep a smaller Lightroom catalog that runs a bit faster, and maybe they don't want the expense of all the hard drives. So that is another way that you could tackle things. But essentially, that is it for a Lightroom Photo Mechanic workflow. If you set everything up correctly, as we discussed at the beginning, you shouldn't have any problems with this method.